Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Open Discussion Podcast. I have a very special guest. Go Army, beat Navy. I got to say it right.
Yeah.
Crystal McFadden, 25 years, Lieutenant Commander, U.S. Navy. 25 years. That is amazing. Serving different leadership positions. Just a real good person, good human being, a good leader. Serve as a training officer. Serve as a recruiter. We're going to go into that a little bit more because I have no idea what the Navy does, really. Head of the engineering department, combat system officer. Man, that's a big label right there. So we're going to explore that a little bit more. A defense fellow and then a military legislative assistant, senior maritime security advisor. And she's a huge champion for financial literacy and empowerment. I really appreciate you, really. It means a lot to me coming on the show here to talk to another service member. It's just something about the Navy kind of scares me, but that's okay. Hopefully, I learned some things about it. It's just the boat, you got on the water and all that stuff. I can't swim that well, so too bad. So, how you been doing?
For one, thank you for that kind, warm introduction. Appreciate that. I'm doing well. I am in the Navy, like you said. I still love the Navy, and looking forward to just having this conversation. Thank you for having
I,
me on.
I appreciate you. It means a lot to me. I usually ask folks, really, because when I joined the Army, I did 23 years. Not 25 is you. I did 23 years, and we all joined for different reasons, right? No matter what branch you serve in, the six different branches. No matter if you serve 2 days, 25 years, and 28 years, whatever the case may be, you just serving for me is very honorable. I would really want to learn about your journey in terms of what was the motivation and what encouraged you to join the Navy. You should have joined the Army if you ask me, but you decided to join the Navy. But what was the inspiration behind the Navy, and why did you decide to serve?
Yeah, so the Navy and the service is probably slightly different, but it all goes together to make this beautiful journey that I've been on. So, the shortest version of that answer is that when I was in high school, when recruiters were actually still allowed to canvas and really be in the schools, I knew a Navy recruiter. They called me early. I took the test. I always had that in the back of my head as an option, right? I was like, okay, I qualified. That was an option. And as a young person, that's great, right? To have options. Turns out I didn't even exercise that option. I actually, I was grown, 17, I graduated. I actually did a 1 year of college. I went to college. I was so young, I stayed at home. So I'm from Chicago. I went to a local school and it really felt like an extension of high school. I was coming home, I was driving to school, coming back, doing homework. And I'm like, wow, I want to travel the world. I need some financial independence. I have all these things that I want. And so the thing that saved me, right? I could have finished college maybe, but I had that option, right? And so that was always in the back of my mind. And I was like, a Navy recruiter. He said I could see the world. And I wanted to, just be part of something bigger than myself. I called up the same recruiter that I had known for almost 2 years, in fact. And I was in the Navy in 2 or 3 months, probably still one of the best decisions I've ever made.
That's amazing though, because we talked about earlier, right? Decided to serve a different reason, and but you took a route. Say, this is what I want to do. I want to explore. When you first went through the whole training process and you got stationed to your first duty station, what was it like? I mean, did you went in with any kind of preconceived notion, and then when you got there, you were like, "Oh man, this is not what I expected it to be." I mean, what was it for you leaving home, leaving college, and now you're in the Navy, away from home, different friends, different places? How were you able to really adapt and transition into those different spaces?
Yeah, so I would like to say, and I'm sure it happens to many people who join, but I was very, very fortunate. I was, in boot camp. It was pretty good, except for, the gas chamber. I made it through boot camp and, I went through my A school. I did well in school. And so I was able to, pick where you want to go. And being from Chicago, I thought of the furthest place that I could think of was Italy. And I was like, yeah, I don't know if I watched a TV show. And I was like, oh, I want to go to Italy. And when we put our preferences in, since I was like, I think number two, maybe number three in my class, I selected Italy and they sent me to
So
Italy, and I'm like, "Are you kidding me?"
that's the
So
first time I
finished
heard that.
school. Oh my goodness, I was stationed in northern Sardinia. It's a tiny island of La Maddalena, and it was like amazing. I was on a ship, right? I always recommend if you're in the Navy, you go to sea because that's what we do most of our work. So I was
Yeah.
able right away to learn the Navy, learn, the ship, learn engineering. I worked in admin, but when you're on a ship, we're firefighters, right? Like you have to, no one's coming to save us. So like being overseas, learning everything about the Navy in a holistic way was, I was just really fortunate. And then of course, September 11th happened. I was in the Navy less than a year. And I was
Mm.
actually about to pull into Naples that morning. I think we were in Europe, whatever time it was. And like seeing that, it almost like solidified that heart of service. Like, oh my God, like our country is under attack. And like on my ship, I was on a submarine tender, which, my age, we don't have those anymore. They're all like been decommissioned, but we directly was able to support the mission. So like, when we have rap songs like Bombs Over Baghdad and like things like that, like my ship resupplied those submarines and carrying that, force to those countries that needed it. And not only did we have ammunition support for the submarines, we did maintenance for them. So really feeling like you're really a part of that mission. Because imagine the submarine, which is a strategic asset, has to go back stateside to replenish. We were right there, like in Greece, right off the coast of Suda Bay, Greece, so we could give them food, maintain the ship, whatever they needed, and also, of course, the weapons. So I was sold from like day three. I was like, this is great.
That's amazing that you were supposed to so many different things, and the army is a little bit different when you take the little iceberg, and then if you have 110 whatever, it's not like Burke can have it your way. You can select your own MOS. For me, I was a combat arm. I just wanted to join the army, right? I just took the test, whatever, to be there. All right, you're gonna be the FA guy. All right, got it. It was great. But how was it for you in terms of people within your life, me, your family, your parents, whatever, after you expressed it? Because my mom was very, very supportive, right? I didn't tell her anything about it. I was pretty bad about it. I just came to her. I said, Mom, guess what? She said, what? I'm going to join the army. I'm leaving in 2 weeks. She said, okay, no, you got my blessing. How was it for you? Folks who were closer to you when they learned that you were going to join the service. What was their response to it?
Yeah, so I was 18, right? Um, so I didn't need permission, right? Because I did that year of college, and my family was more surprised that I made the decision, not necessarily unsupportive, but wasn't overly overjoyed that I
Yeah.
was joining the military and I was going to the Navy. But actually, my father, he served for I think 2.5 years, but he did serve in the Air Force. So like there is some history. He didn't talk much about it. But my mom is just like, why? I'm like, because I want to stop here. But eventually they came around, and I enjoyed their full support during the process.
Yeah.
But it wasn't like a sense of motivation for me.
Yeah, I usually tell folks one of my biggest regret here was that I did not really share my military experiences with my family, my mom and my dad. Most especially my mom. She came once when I graduated AIT and basic training in 1998.
Um,
I never brought her over to where, like promotions and different assignments you
mhm.
were. I wish I would have done that. And I usually tell folks, man, if you have an opportunity to let your parents or folks who are closer to you, who have invested into you, see exactly what you've been doing, because my mom is pretty, that's my girl. I love my mom. I wish I would have done something different. So what you got an organization now? You enlisted initially, and you enjoying yourself. Everything's going pretty good, but then you had to make a switch. You went from being enlisted to the officer side. We call it the doc side. You kind of jumped ship, of course. So what was the
Yeah, so back to that initial positive experience. So one other thing that for me was very helpful, I was a personnel specialist, right? So I worked in an admin officer office. I understood the programs that the Navy had because that was my job, right? So
yeah.
like how to get your awards, your pay, those kind of things. So I kind of that was like my secret power because I understood all the Navy programs. And so very early on, right, enjoying Italy, you can drink wine at 18. You're traveling, like literally traveling the world, seeing things that you really imagine
Yeah.
actually happening. I knew early on that I wanted a commissioning, but I knew also that I needed a degree. And so being even on my first ship, I actually made it to like E5, and I was like, man, I need to finish school because I saw officers, right? So that modeling, I would meet, actually, I love the supply corps. I know you said your wife was in logistics. And I was
Yeah.
like, oh my God, the supply officers, they're doing food service, they're handling the budgets. And so that's what I thought I wanted to do. And so right away, I kind of mentally was like, okay, let me start looking at the programs. And for the Navy specifically, we have a spectrum like any other thing with the different programs, whether it's, we have a seaman to admiral where you are allowed to finish college. They pick you up, you finish school, you get commissioned, or anything in between, but I knew I had to finish school. So finished my time on the ship, and then immediately I went to Bahrain. I took a few classes, but once I was back stateside for my fourth year in the Navy, I just dove straight in to taking classes full time. And as you know, I had that 1 year already
Yeah.
under my belt. So I was like, I have to finish school because I want to become an officer. And even that, I, took advantage of programs. I never paid for school. I used tuition assistance in service. I even used some of my Montgomery GI Bill. And I just needed that degree so I could apply for a commission. And so that was my goal early on. And it took a while.
Yeah.
But that's what I decided because I saw those amazing officers on board, female officers, just very good officers. And, I understood the pay chart. I understood what responsibilities they had. And I was like, I already love the Navy, right? So if you
Yeah.
love something, you want to be part of that organization. Let's see how far, I can go.
That's amazing, though, how you just put that in terms of based on your position in the job you were doing, you had an opportunity to see exactly what route to take and what decision to make because you already have the information and it allows you to make the right decision. For folks who don't know a lot about the Navy, like myself here, really, how would you describe the Navy to someone who does not, because I know you served as a recruiter back in your career. I mean, how will I'm trying to join the Navy, but I have no idea what the Navy's all about so far. I'm not saying, you explain every little detail in terms of every position, but from your perspective, if you was to tell folks about the Navy, what would that be?
Yeah, so the Navy provides, our nation, right, with an option. And you hear me say that a lot, right? So, like, the Navy is one of, within the joint force, a strategic option. And
Yeah.
I feel like it is one of the best, not comparable to, anything else, but
So you
it's
got to
a
rub it
great
in. You got
option.
to rub it in. Huh? One of the best. Okay, I
You
see you.
started it because of one thing, and that's really our mission:
Yeah.
forward presence, right? We have that deterrence mission that the Navy in any given theater, in anywhere in the world, within less than a day, the Navy is already there, right? So
Yeah.
once I got commissioned, I served on amphibious ships. We go out and we do patrols off the coast of wherever, right? We take Marines with us. And that's just our amphibious force, right? We have our carrier strike group. So you have a strategic asset talking about virtually zero logistics initially, right? Like we are forward deployed, we are forward, we are present. Imagine everyone loves their iPhone. We are protecting those lines of sea lines of communication, right? So everyone wants their fancy things from China. The ocean has to be able, to be open, right?
Yeah.
We have to you heard about the issues with Panama Canal and other little gridlocks that you might have. That impacts your daily life. And at the worst case scenario, if it's a time for war, that decision can be made. And there's an aircraft carrier as we speak. There's an amphibious readiness group as we speak, already forward deployed, ready to go, ready to provide those options
That's amazing.
for our.
I've always had a huge respect for the Navy, really, because I love to watch war movies. So I watch a lot of different war movies, a lot of Navy stuff. It just that sub, I can't. It's just too much for me. But it seems like it's pretty amazing. A good friend of mine, really, a good friend of mine, his son was in the Navy. I think security forces or something like that, and he got out a
Mhm.
couple of years ago. But man, that's amazing how you frame it in terms of what the Navy does, because a lot of folks have no idea. Because all they see is the Army and the Marine, but the Navy plays a huge role, really huge role. I would like to transition into some of your position you serve in, if you just want to just discuss a little bit more in terms of leadership position, right? Because leadership is key, as an officer, for folks under your command, the folks you led, an organization you led. How was that for you, in a kind of command role and a kind of role that requires some responsibility? How were you able to lead effectively, and how would you describe your leadership style as a leader?
Yeah, no, thank you for that question. I think for me, especially being a prior enlisted officer, I always felt like that was my superpower, but I never led with that, right? So,
Gotcha.
like, for me to have come from in the Navy, we call it the deck plates, right? Like, I've been a sailor, I've been at those junior levels. So, I always led with empathy, right? Understanding, obviously there's, levels of resources you may have or not have, but I always had empathy. I always tried to be authentic as possible as a leader. And then really just to not only just be authentic, but be consistent. I feel like that as a leader, even if people don't like you, if you're consistent, they will respect you, right? Because you can be predictable, you can be consistent, and people value that whether they realize it initially or not. And then also, and I'm very conscious of this as a woman because we are naturally emotional, I have to be very diligent about being reflective all the time, right? So I'm always reflecting on what are my goals, I'm reflecting on how I'm doing, and I'm making sure that being authentic doesn't mean being soft, doesn't mean giving in, but I want to be firm. But I'm also trying to be calm in a scenario and making sure that people understand the mission, right?
Yeah.
And understand what you need to get done, and then provide them with the authority at the right level and provide them with the resources that they need so that they can get the job done. I mean, most people I lead, not all, but definitely most, are smarter than me, right? Like I was a combat systems officer. I had electricians working for me. I had electrical engineers and
Yeah.
electronics technicians. They're fixing radars, right? They don't need me to get into the weeds of their SOP and tell them how to fix their radar, right? I could read, but like they're a subject matter expert. So all I need to do is create an environment so that they can thrive. And understanding that is kind of like how I lead.
That's amazing. Thanks for really framing that. You had some real good points in there, and it's a leadership lesson, right, for folks, as you stated so far. You may have some leader who would want to do everybody else's job for them. Those guys and girls has the expertise. Your job is to provide the resources and just get out of the way and do the job and provide the support they need so far. Uh, so each branch is different in terms of its structure. Talking about rank structure. In the Army, for us, we have non-commissioned officer. I know the Navy has it, and everybody has it so far. The role of a non-commissioned officer in the Army is a little bit different, I think, probably to the Navy or Marine Corps, whatever the case may be. How would you describe that relationship within the Navy? An officer and they call it senior master chief or master chief. I don't know really. When you were serving, you had that non-commissioned officer alongside with you. Not sure if it's like that, but how was it? And how will you describe that relationship between you and that non-commissioned officer? And to your viewpoint, how important you think it is to have a good relationship with those non-commissioned officers and those enlisted personnel?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So what I hear you asking, and I don't want to answer the question I want to ask. You're talking about our senior non-commissioned officers and then just the enlisted personnel in general. Is that correct?
Yes, yes,
Very good. Okay. Yeah. So you kind of already said it. My like chief, right? That's what the Navy is, the
yeah,
chief,
in chief.
the chief, right? Like they're a whole core of their own. Those are those same, subject matter experts that has transcended the ranks and they're at those higher levels. So as a commissioned officer, that is one of the most important relationships to have. And I would even argue that it's more than a relationship, it's a partnership, right? Because just like I said, for instance, I'm not an electrician, right? But my chief standing next to me, not only is he a leader like I am, but he's also a subject matter expert. So you have that wealth of knowledge and experience in that senior enlisted leader, and also that duality of like leadership, right? So like when I think of like disciplinary, right, at the lower levels, I'm the officer. Take that to my chief to handle, and they deal with that in what we call the chief's mess. So that's like a very formal process, and chiefs take pride in that, like good order and discipline, leadership, that deck plate leadership, that they're going to give them the support technically that I don't even have. And then I have that oversight, leading from up from below, right? Leading up through our commanding officer, making sure our sailors are awarded, taking care of their pay, their finances. And that's like my technical partner to ensure that the job, the mission, those specifics are being handled. And if that relationship isn't solid, you can have a very hard time as an officer for sure.
Yeah, it's somewhat similar to the army. I think what you just described is the same thing. I had the opportunity to work with different senior officer when I served as a first sergeant, battalion command sergeant major, brigade command sergeant major, and I still talk to my last brigade commander. We pretty close, and those relationship is paramount. It's the reason why some other nations kind of envy our military just because of that relationship you talk about in terms of the chief and the senior chief and the non-commissioned officer. But that dynamic in terms of you have an officer has his or her role, and you have that chief, like that enlisted person has their role, but both somewhat merges to create a command and make sure everybody's taken care of. I would like to explore the family dynamic, right? Because the family play a huge role, when it comes to military service. Considering you guys are always gone, you're on the boat with the submarine, whatever the case may be. How were you able to balance that, right? Because people use the term, life work balance, and you're constantly moving, you PCS, and you go to different organizations, different places, and but the family play a huge role, and everybody handle this differently. How will you describe how were you able to navigate that? And if there's any advice you can give to somebody who is currently serving with family or may serve with family to say, hey, this different place, different time, but it's how I manage it. And what recommendations can you provide to folks who currently find themselves in that space?
Yes, another amazing question. So I am married, right? My spouse is not serving right now, so he's a civilian spouse, and I have a son. So I think for me, and my son is 9 years old. So the beginning part, I have like kind of phases in my career. When I was single, go getter, get your degree. Everything was fine. As I got married, as I had my son, you definitely have to monitor that balance. A lot of people will say this weird cliche thing, and I still like it because I believe it's true, right? People say you can't have everything, but I would like to say that you can't have everything at the same
At the
time,
same
right?
time.
And so what I mean by that is a physical balance, right? So at some times in some commands and jobs I've been in, I've had to have a very candid conversation with my husband. It's like, I need your support now because, I'm going to be out the home, or do we need to bring in extra help, and things like that. If I know that I can't be there as much, or I know I'm going to work long hours, I've had, I think the longest was 12 months. I was a
Mhm.
commissioning coordinator, and I had to go to a place stateside, but so far away from my family for a whole year, right? So,
Man.
like, I asked my mom to, like, hey, could you come stay with us, help my husband, maintaining that balance. And then on the other side of that, having your family support, I mean, it's priceless. Whether it's my mom, whether it's my husband, they are partners, right? But in addition to that, when I am at home and when you do have the time, quality over quantity
Quantity. Yeah.
any day of the week. If I'm home for 2 weeks and I'm gone for 3 months, in that 2 weeks, you have to make the best out of it, right? Like I decided one summer, my son was going to learn how to read. I don't know if it was mom guilt because I knew I was leaving, or I didn't want him in a public school system prior to knowing how to read. Either way, before he went to kindergarten, just that small 2 months, I laser focused, put him in programs. I work him at night.
Mm.
And like my son learned how to read before he went to kindergarten. That was not a sacrifice, but that was a decision I made because that was what was important right then, right? And so understanding where you are, communicating transparently with whatever partners you have. And for instance, I have girlfriends that are single parents and they build villages around them
Yeah.
the same way. But having that support, whether it's in the home or having community support, is huge. And really just asking for help and being transparent on what you need And then, like I said, when you have the time, you really got to try to lock in and make the most out of it.
That's pretty significant though, because when I went to Germany, we had to build this new organization from scratch. You know, when we got to Germany, the commander and I, there was no blueprint, there was no playbook. They say, all right, there you go, you got it, and we had a lot of new folks coming into the organization, being single parent and married folks, whatever the case may be. And as you say, we have to build that community to make sure that, folks are taken care of, because we realized early on that if the family is taken care of, that service member is going to perform their task very, very effectively,
Absolutely.
So that's where I see that organization, within the army that I saw, the focus on the mission. The mission, it is important, but if you forget the family dynamic, you have a huge problem. And that's one area I think the army have done a better job in taking care of the family, because before it was all about the mission, the mission, the mission, the mission. But they've done a great job in fixing that to make sure they have that community, whatever, folks can take care of each other. I think that's pretty good on how you just frame it. I would like to talk about the Navy. I want to use the term evolution, because when you came in back in 1775 up to today, things have changed a lot. you know, things have changed a lot, right? You've seen a lot of changes within the Navy, just from not just from a people aspect, from policy and whatever the case may be. You don't have to go in deep, whatever. But what are some changes have you seen in terms of the force itself, the Navy? You've seen so far that you believe, something? Yeah, this is good, because for the Army, folks, the older guys always complain about the young soldiers. Oh, they're lazy, they're always on their phone, whatever the case may be. I said, no, you just have to make sure that you adapt, because that's just who they are. But from your perspective, from what you've been observing, from when you came into now, what are some changes, if anything, you want to share with us? You've seen that have taken place, and you believe, yeah, I think this is pretty good for us.
Right. Yeah. Lots of changes, if you can imagine, right? All of this time. But the few changes that stand out, and of course I'm biased because, I'm a woman. It is what it is. I was born
Yeah,
this way. But like, in speaking of that work-life balance, that's why it came to mind, like maternity policies, right?
yeah,
We used to have women, after having a baby, 4 months later be
mhm,
deployed, right? That's not really sustainable or healthy, but we would
yeah,
do it because we wanted to be a peer and a great, great at our jobs. So maternity policies, whether it's, you don't have to deploy to at least 1 year. And guess what? If you're a badass, you can deploy earlier, but you have that option, right?
yeah,
To have take a year, not working, but non-deployable status. I've seen that change. I mean, I've seen male, we have paternal leave, right?
yeah,
So men had a baby, and they just went back to work. So we realized that if they're going to be true partners and parents, they also need time off. So those things are amazing. I mean, we've seen women in combat. I mean, imagine, remember, I told you my first ship was a submarine tender. That's classified as a support ship. It's not a
mhm,
combat ship. Remember, we supported those submarines. Now, women can serve on those submarines that you like to talk
man,
about. We can serve on combat ships. We can serve in combat roles. So that's been huge. And then, I mean, we've had lots of countless uniform changes, but just little and big things that really just fine tune the service and make it more enjoyable. We've had changes to our retirement accounts, right? When I came in, it was a standard retirement. You did your 20 years and you got
yeah,
out. If you didn't do your 20 years, you got nothing and you
nothing,
just went home, right? And so they revamped our whole retirement system. I'd be remiss if I almost forgot that.
yeah,
Right? You have the blended retirement system where, it may be, it's an option for people to choose when you're retiring, but imagine you serve 12 years, right? You have that 401k to
yeah,
take with you now. That's, to me, that's a huge, I wish I could use that when I was a recruiter, right? Because it used to be retire or nothing. And now there is, you have a 401k plan. Obviously, we have world class medical. I mean, things
yeah,
people take for granted. I mean,
yeah.
I don't. But lots of amazing changes, but that's just a few that I'll share.
That's amazing. You just said something that just stimulate the next question, right? The whole retirement and whole finance stuff, because you are a huge advocate and a huge believer in financial literacy. You talk about it, just empower and just educate folks. I want to just spend some time to talk about it, because when I was coming up in the Army initially, I was terrible. I'm still learning right now, really. And I can tell you a lot of folks in the military are struggling. We know the Army don't pay you that much, but the money is good enough if you manage it properly. Just be straightforward, because you have medical, you have dental, you have housing, whatever the case may be. What got you into financial literacy? What got you so passionate about it? And makes it something you experience, as far as personally to get you involved into? I just want to explore that and talk about your journey to educating folks on financial literacy.
Yeah, no, thank you for the question because this is a passion of mine. So, for sure. And, just to be even, we can just stay in the Navy or the military specifically, starting back to the beginning, right? I lived overseas. If you received a bill on a ship, on an island in Italy, and you were holding it in your hand, it was already late, right?
Mm,
Like,
yeah.
oh, like I had to immediately like, oh my God, like I set up web bill pay. And you know what you have to do to set up web bill pay? You have to have a budget, right? Because they're gonna take the money. So like even just being stationed remotely overseas allowed me to start to see that like I have to manage my money, right? Because I can't do it like everyone else, just go into a place and pay a bill. I mean, I know it's much different now, but little things like that. Or for instance, when I went to Bahrain, they had a save and deposit program. I'm big on programs. I'm like, what do we have? And so, just doing those little things. Or when they came out, I was actually in the military before TSP, right?
TSP.
TSP didn't used to be for active duty, right? So understanding and navigating the TSP, which still we can use so much more training. But for me, it was just always small milestones that I hit and decisions that I made. And then when I look around me and I notice that it wasn't like a common knowledge kind of thing, that's when really became passionate. Like personally, I've always knew that I wanted to be independent. So what that word means to me is a lot of different things, starting with, a job, but moving past a job, I knew I had to save, right? And before I even learned how to invest, which I think should be taught much sooner, I knew I could save money. I knew to budget. I knew to pay my bills on time. Some people, they need to understand credit, right? Most people don't understand that if you pay your credit card balance, the statement balance, at the right time, then you don't pay interest, right? And then you can flip it. How do you leverage credit to build wealth, right? We have VA home loans. Like, how many people don't take advantage of maybe trying to buy a property or using debt in a healthy way that they can build wealth? But for me, all of those little milestones from living overseas, being in Bahrain and tax free to buying my first home, understanding that equity, and then now becoming a real estate investor and a market investor, I'm just like, my goodness, like I look at my sailors, they don't understand that you're paying 10% on an auto loan, right? Or more.
Yeah. Hmm.
So,
What will you tell a young sailor, Sam Zoker, who got in and live in the barracks, or if you're on the ship or whatever the case may be? What will you advise? What your advice would be to them in terms of how they approach financial literacy, in terms of saving here and investing here? Because of course, for E1, E2, E3, E4, E5, the pay is not that much, right? But incrementally, you can build from there. What would be your advice to someone who has no idea, just graduate high school and now, in the Navy or the Army, the Marine, whatever the case may be, in terms of how to prepare for their financial as far as freedom?
right, yeah. So simple, but understand how much money you have, right?
Yeah.
Some people have no idea. How much money do you have? How much do you have coming in? How much do you have going out? And set up a basic budget. Once you do that, my advocate is pay yourself first, right? AKA put some savings away for yourself. Even if you start with one, two, three, maybe reach up to 10% of your money, save some money for a rainy day. And that's way we can talk about you using credit wisely. And then in addition to that, like we have now, take advantage of what's in front of you. So the TSP, if you're getting a match, you don't receive a TSP match unless they have to have something to match, right? So maximize everything that is for you that is at low cost, that is like a ploy, like for instance, a 401k, like
Yeah.
that should be your priority. How much money can I get into my TSP at a minimum for a match? Then, take some classes. Most banks, Navy Federal, credit unions, credit card company providers understand credit cards. So many people don't know how much credit interest they're paying. They don't understand how important your credit score is as an adult person, especially now more than ever. No
Yeah.
one, I can't go and buy my house in cash. So having a low credit score is going to literally cost you money because you're going to get the worst rates. So you have to understand your credit score and what goes into that. You have to know it, monitor it. We're already responsible people. You just need those extra tools. And then once you're taking advantage of your 401k, you have a healthy savings, which I would call at least 3 months. I mean, we're speaking while we're in a government shutdown.
Yeah.
Some people haven't got paid for 45 days and they're struggling, right? That means you don't have an emergency plan. So those basics, and then, just learning more about investing and things like that. Like I said, the BA is a great program, different type of investments, but the basics is like credit score, savings, taking advantage of your employer provided plans, and maybe seeking, a financial advisor or financial counseling once you get those things in line.
Yeah, it's something I wish, it probably have changed since I left the military to 2021. You are absolutely right in terms of sailors and airmen and Army, Navy, get some kind of training on that stuff early on within their career. We're not exposed to that really, and it is difficult, as you said so far. A lot of guys, somewhat reluctant to transition out of service because they don't know exactly what to expect. They don't have, that savings or investment because I experienced it myself. I'm not gonna lie to you. And I do believe early detection or early as far as education on it will help folks a lot in terms of preparing yourself, and you won't have to rely on different systems and different support, whatever the case may be. So thanks for sharing that. And I applaud you for being very, very in terms of committed to it and just spreading the words about it, just teaching folks about it. And I really appreciate you for that. I would like to talk just a little bit more about your career, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
Over the last 25 years or so, there are some times in your career you came across some things, man, geez, challenges and obstacles. Sometimes folks may put some things in your way just because who you are as a person, whatever. Have you experienced any challenges and an obstacle that was put in front of you, and how were you able to navigate that? Have you seen someone else who had to experience something like that?
For sure. I would be remiss. I said I
Yeah.
started in a very healthy, happy place in the Navy, and that created an amazing foundation
Yeah.
for me. When waters are troubled, you have something, positive to fall back on. But absolutely, I've experienced challenges in my career. Um, just for example, and not to go into too much details, but I've had to not only work but lead in toxic environments, right, where a mixture of poor leadership, low manning, right, so the stress of like not having enough, do what you can with
Yeah.
what you have, right, and being a leader and trying to navigate that was very difficult. When, just like for instance, I talked about that partnership, right, and how important it is for enlisted and officers to lead a division. Well, I was a whole chief engineer, and my chief, which would have been a gas turbine, because on a destroyer, DDG, actual combat ship, we have gas turbine engines, right? They're literally airplane engines converted to be on a ship, right? I never worked on an airplane engine. Never. I've inspected one, and so I got to the command, and within 2 weeks, my E8, my senior chief, well, he was retiring. And oh, by the way, he wasn't going on deployment with us.
Whoa.
And I'm just like, oh, wait. So my most senior gas turbine mechanic, right, which is the people who actually know that engine inside and out, was E6, which is a good amount of experience. But if you could imagine, as an officer, I don't usually partner, right, with E6 and below, but you can. And so that was really challenging. And I had to lean heavily on people that I wasn't as comfortable with, but you try to, figure that out. And that really, tested my health, right? I mean, I was to the point where I wasn't sleeping because I was the chief engineer. And in the Navy, I also couldn't just focus on the engine. I had to, I was a tactician as well. So I was a tactical officer. So I had to spend time doing what we call fighting the ship, where I'm in charge of the combat systems. If we need to launch a missile, I mean, just look at what's happening in the Red Sea or what was happening, right? Like I would be that person on watch, ready to, launch a missile in defense of the ship if needed. So while I wasn't doing that, I was trying to learn the engine. And if you can count the hours of the day, I didn't eat or sleep for days. And I actually physically got really sick. And I had to ask for help, which is a very hard thing to do when you're
Yeah.
in leadership. And that really affected my confidence, thinking that, I couldn't do everything. I initially, when I walked away from that, it really felt like a dark spot, right? Like, oh my God, you didn't excel to the level, but I really didn't have the resources. And so what I did since then is, regain my confidence, try again. I went on to be a combat systems officer, and just kept pushing. But being able to lead in that very challenging environment was probably one of the worst parts of my career.
Thanks for sharing that, right? Because leaders sometimes we don't love to seek help. We got it. And coming to the realization, say, hey, I'm going to seek some help. That was pretty good, really. And you assess the situation was pretty out of control to some extent. You have a lot of stuff going on, and you seeking help. That says a lot about you because some folks probably just ride it to the wheel falls out, right? Compared to asking for help. So I always tell folks, man, hey, always seek help, ask for assistance, whatever the case may be, because I can assume, I don't know, working on those shaping on those boats is very, very stressful. I think it's one of the most stressful environment probably ever because you there for what 2, 3, 4, 6 months. Well, at the time you're not going home to depress and recharge. You there. That can be a lot. So transition is inevitable. We all have to transition one day, right? And I know you were considering it. Not yet. You were considering transition, and how has that been going for you in terms of mentally? Because now you are navigating an operation environment which you're not familiar with. You've been in the Navy for a couple of days now. You know exactly how to navigate that. But now you're in a different space. How are you doing so far? How are you preparing to transition? Is that a concern you may have when it comes to transitioning?
Yes. I mean, all great points. Thank you for the question. I am definitely transitioning now within the 12 months. We all will
Okay.
at some point. I feel very grateful that one, because I was freaking out, I may still be. And so I feel like I'm a planner. And so
Gotcha.
even though I'm barely within 12 months, I've already like joined programs, went to TAPS classes. I had updated my LinkedIn. I have a resume. And so I'm like, to your point, I've spent 25 years doing not the exact same thing, but, being in
Yeah.
the same organization.
Mhm.
And so that really was eye opening for me to like, if I want to do this well, I'm going to start right now. So from the time I went to TAPS, and just to tell people that that's what I'm doing, people have been so open to help me, to point me to different programs. I could almost be a transition specialist. I'm like, did you know about this? And I reviewed my resume. I'm like, I spent 11 years in HR. I'm a professional HR. I got that certification, right? I'm like, oh, I think I need to do project management because that may help me. And so I'm like positioning, whether it's more certifications, more training, lots of networking, making sure I do like, informational interviews, like
Yeah.
what are people doing? And really just trying to align what, my values, my goals with what does that mean and what does that look like on the outside. And as that becomes more clear, transition becomes more guided, if that makes sense, right? Like I'm like, okay, I don't know where, but I know this direction. And so now I am instead of doing a bunch of things, I want to do the things that are moving the needle toward where I know I want to go. So having that awareness and the fact that I will have a retirement, so I am trying to be choosy about where I want to land. I have invested, right? So I don't want just a job. I want to have something that really aligns, a mission and, work that aligns with who I actually am. And for most people in the military, myself included, I mean, that took months just like, who am I? Who are you? Because you're always being told who
Yeah.
you are.
Mhm.
I know the mission because they told me what it was, right? I can get behind that. But like when you have to choose, that's actually been the hardest thing. Like, what's your choice? You know, I
Yeah.
just need a steak or chicken. I got you. But if I have to choose from scratch, I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's pretty good. I can tell you, I think you're way ahead of the ball game in terms of your transition, the things you've been involved with, the program you get involved with, as far as expanding your network and reaching out to folks, because that's the thing a lot of us we didn't do. Because I expressed to you in the past, I had a terrible transition because I had this preconceived notion. Not just me, a lot of guys that I talk to, go through the same process. You are an officer or senior officer or senior non-commissioned officer. You have some level of experience, a degree here and there, that when you transition, folks will just be lining up to give you a job or give you opportunity. But there's a lot of work that goes into it. A lot of work that goes into it. You going through the process you're going through now, 12 months out, setting the right condition to prepare yourself for transition. I think you're on the right path. I think you were doing an outstanding job in terms of just preparing yourself, not just mentally, but the entire, I call it 360 assessment, right? Which where you want to go, what you want to do, what is in line with your value system, what you're trying to do, what make you happy, really. I think you're on the right path for sharing that. And I got a couple of questions here before I let you go. I don't want to hold you hostage. And a couple of rapid fire questions. What would you say has been your best assignment?
Working on a hill. Yeah,
Why?
working
I
on
heard
Capitol
it's
Hill.
painful up there.
It is, but it was just one of those moments of just, I was humble. It was like I was in awe. Like you can read about legislation and you learn about government in school, but to walk those halls and
Yeah.
to like work directly for a congressman, to go to committee, to understand how the member thinks. I mean, I've met with CEOs of you name a defense, prime, and like just to see. And for me, I worked in the appropriation side because I like the money.
The
Where's the
money.
money? Where's the money being spent? How's the money being appropriated? So naturally I worked in appropriations and just understanding how we budget as a country and
Yeah.
really how all of that works or doesn't, was just really amazing. And then there's the parties. You get invited to everything. You're like a
What?
freaking asset. Everyone wants you at their party. I don't think I had to buy food for a year. All the happy hours. No, it was a great experience. And to step outside the Navy, right? I'm in suits, I'm not in uniform.
Yeah.
I had to realize people just know me as Crystal. And so my integrity and my reputation is what I create, not like I'm the commander, right? You have to respect me. I had to learn that I'm just Crystal. And the work I did today and tomorrow and yesterday, that's my reputation. And I don't have that background. You know what I mean? So I felt like a little glimpse into, civilian world.
That's amazing. That's good. You was exposed to that. That's amazing. Who you say has been the most instrumental person, with the exception of your spouse, but outside of your spouse, in terms of your career overall, who would you say has been the most instrumental person, and why? You don't have to call the name if you don't want to call the name. Just
Yeah. So many, but really who I would say, and no pun intended, because I know all of you guys are senior enlisted, but really, like, one of my command master chiefs, right? And command means, they work for the captain, they're part
yeah,
of that command leadership team. And even, back to the worst time, that was the one person that like kept me sane, right? Like that poured into me, that I could go into her office and close the door and just vent,
yeah,
because as you get more and more senior, the circle of people, you can't complain to
it's
everybody.
pretty
You can't
small.
complain
Yeah,
in public, you can't cry, you have to wear a smile. And so to just be almost like a she wasn't a chaplain, but that senior enlisted leader that I was able to, even if she wasn't fixing my problem, just to have that communication, those privileged communications with, um, and just seeing how she navigated the same environment I was in from her perspective was really, really, it gave me a lot of strength and a lot of confidence in that environment. And so those senior leaders are amazing. And I would just say that I've been enlisted and I've been an officer, and we take pretty good care of our enlisted sailors. Sometime as you get to be a leader, you don't really have that built in, right? On the officer side, people that are there and their only purpose is to advocate for you. So to have her lend that, time to me as an officer was just amazing.
That's nice. Appreciate you for sharing that. Worst advice someone ever given you?
I probably ignored it if it said that.
You don't have to
Worst
respond. I'm just
advice.
saying you don't have to
Oh,
respond.
don't buy a home. It's always the
Don't buy a
don'ts,
home.
right?
Yeah,
The
yeah, of
fear
course.
monger is like, don't do this, don't do that. And I was like, you're not even qualified to make that statement, but
Yeah,
okay. Yeah, all the
that's
naysayers. Yeah, I'm
yeah.
definitely a risk taker.
That's, I mean, you've been a commander, you've been enlisted, and you've been exposed to different things. So of course you built different. Again, I appreciate you really for taking your time to come on here and just share your experiences and but really talk about financial as far as literacy and command and relationship and people and your job on the hill. That is amazing. I think you have a very unique skill set, outstanding background to where when you transition, I think you're going to be okay. I really appreciate you. As we close the shop here, do you have anything else for you like to share?
Yeah, I just like to say that, military is great. There's opportunities. You see one, investigate, take advantage of everything the military, the services, has to offer, and it'll be fine. And thank you, Sam, for having me on here. This has been so fun.
I appreciate you, really. Thank you again for taking time out of your schedule to hang out with the regular folks over here. I really appreciate you, really. Thank you. Thanks a lot for what you do.